Hi, today I'd like to present to you how astrology could be strongly validated thanks to a successful matching protocol showing statistically significant correspondances between astrological keywords and biographical elements. What is a matching protocol? It's simply something like blind wine tasting. On one side, you have the astrological charts of a certain number of subjects. On the other side, you have their psychological descriptions, and they must be paired blindly. I thought I should try to develop a protocol that would truly express my astrological practice and especially why I say that astrology works. Since 2007, I have been developing an expert system for astrological interpretation, and a few years ago, this expert system has been introduced to assist interpretation in an astrological software. In 2016, I found a way to use it to establish a Vernon-Clark protocol. What is a Vernon-Clark protocol? This is what I told you earlier. It's a matching protocol, a protocol that matches or that associates blindly astrological charts to their owners. This kind of protocol is simple to analyze from a statistical point of view. It is not very sensitive to artifacts caused by astronomical variations or demographic biases. In fact, my research is partly similar to this famous Carlson study that produced so-called negative results for astrology. But my protocol is simpler, and it has the advantage over all the previous researches that it's almost completely automated, which has never been done before. In all the previous matching protocols, even if they had been successful, critics could argue that astrologers may in fact rely on ESP and not on information provided by astrological birth charts. There are currently more scholars willing to accept ESP than astrology. Because everything is automated, one of the advantages of this protocol is that it eliminates the human factor to test purely and strictly astrology. To automate the process, I had at my disposal two tools. The expert system that we'll examine in a minute, and that will replace the astrologer by generating a list of words for each subject analyzed. This is an example with Picasso's chart. I have also a semantic analysis tool that I developed called Semantic Proximity Estimator. This tool allows one to numerically evaluate the semantic proximity between two lists of words. A list that is represented here vertically and a list that is represented horizontally. With the estimator, we can analyze to what extent the two lists say or do not say the same thing and get numerical scores to rank how well the word lists match up. For example, if we had two identical lists, we would get values of 100%. In my study, n is equal to 42. In the blind match between n astrological description and n biographical descriptions for n subjects, everything is deduced automatically without any human intervention. I worked with 42 randomly selected celebrities from whom I had reliable birth data and good biographies. They are listed on the screen and sorted alphabetically. Not totally random. In fact, I use a biographical source, a book of 100 portraits published by Le Monde, a leading French newspaper which offers the right side of text. Of course, I was not to read 42 biographies of 300 pages. On the other hand, if one goes on Wikipedia or encyclopedia like Universalis or Britannica, the texts are generally too short. So I needed the right level, and I found that the size of the text in Le Monde was appropriate. In fact, for the selection of the biographies, I went simply in alphabetic order, that is, in the order of the book, and I kept all the cases for which I could find a birth date and an exact birth time. Obviously, the extraction of the words in the book was evidently being completely independent of my knowledge of the astrological chart. When I made the biographic word list, I forbade myself to have a look at the astrological charts beforehand. But the mere fact of saying this does not constitute a proof. Therefore, I'm presently thinking about an improved protocol which would be even more rigorous for the choice of biographies and the choice of words. Those biographical lists must be of sufficient quality to make it possible to discriminate the subjects between them independently of astrology. For instance, I select the aviator Jean Mermoz, Picasso, Boris Yeltsin, and I consider their descriptions, which are psychological descriptions extracted from their biographies without recourse to astrology. I see that Mermoz is energetic with strength, assurance, audacity. The descriptors are nouns and not adjectives. Determination, power, and so on. For Picasso, we have desire, love, energy, passion, determination, sensuality, greed, eroticism, etc. These features are what one finds and which one can extract from Picasso's portrait. For Yeltsin, conflict, fighting, combativity, struggle, opposition, etc. If I gave you these three lists mixed with the three names and that you know the three characters, Mermoz, Picasso, and Yeltsin, it is the least of things to expect you to be able to do the good associations. Otherwise, it is certain that the protocol is doomed to failure. We will never succeed with astrology if we cannot get there in this way. So, the descriptions must at least be good ones, even if they do not come from psychological tests. Obviously, the more names I have, the more complicated the problem is. Usually, in this type of protocol, there are few subjects. For example, the Quebec skeptics had a test with 7 subjects that the astrologer had to discriminate blindly, a test that did not work in favor of astrology. Imagine with 42 subjects, it's really another story being able to discriminate correctly and make good matches. It's something that goes beyond a normal human capacity. But precisely thanks to the expert system and to the Semantic Proximity Estimator, I managed to do this exercise in an automated way thanks to what I'm going to show you. Let's take Picasso as an example. Here, I have words that appear in the window analysis to the left. Those words constitute his list of astrological traits. So, for Picasso, what do we have? On one side, we have what astrology gives us: love, sensibility, sociability, beauty, inhibition, contradiction, passion, art, will. More than 150 words giving an astrological description of Picasso, where each word is justified by an astrological signature. For example, love. On the other side, we have psychological traits from a biography: desire, love, energy, passion, determination, sensuality, avidity, the same words that we have just seen before. In summary, for each of the 42 celebrities, the software created a list of about, at minimum, 124 for Abbé Pierre to a maximum of 230 for Cartier-Bresson. Descriptive keywords that are based on specific astrological factors, sign aspects, midpoints in their birth chart. And these astrological word lists are automatically matched against comparable words lists extracted from the Le Monde celebrity biographies. How can we decide if the bio and the astro lists of traits are sufficiently similar to declare that we have a good astrological description? This is a very difficult problem, much more difficult than we usually think. Among others, we're fighting with the Barnum effect and confirmation biases. First, we will no longer ask, is this astrological description a good description of Picasso. We will rather ask, is this Picasso's astro description better for Picasso than for Bill Clinton? Second, it's not even us humans who will answer the last question. The Semantic Proximity Estimator will do the job. How? Let's place Picasso's two-word list in the analysis sheet of the Semantic Proximity Estimator. Oh, by the way, the study was done in French because the biographical source was in French, and also because it's my mother tongue. But to make things easier for you, I will treat Picasso's example in English. So, horizontally we have the astrological words, and vertically we have the biographical words. I will try to explain how it works with Picasso words. Vertically, we have the list of his biographical words: desire, love, energy, passion, and so on. Horizontally, we have the list of his astrological words as found by Mastro expert. The number of astrological words is the number of columns, 182, and the number of biographical words is the number of rows, 95. The goal is to check to which extent these two lists say the same thing or not, and to numerically evaluate their semantic proximity. We check first if there are identical words in the two lists. These identities are indicated by black cells in the matrix. For instance, for the word love, we have identity. Passion, here. Determination, here. Why the number 1001 appears in the black cells? To clearly distinguish this type of correspondence identity from other types of correspondence that will be seen in a few minutes. In fact, two things must be measured: the proportion of astrological words that generate hits when compared to biographical words, and the proportion of biographical words that receive hits generated from astrological words. The method for assigning a final numerical score to the total of all these identities comes from a reflection about the two types of errors in statistics, type 1 and 2. I explain. One type of error would be to have in the biographical word of Picasso a word that is not in the astrological list. For instance, here the number 0 for love adventure indicates this type of error: present in biography, absent from astrology. In the same way, we have the other type of error in the astrological list. For instance, the word skepticism is found in astrology, but not in biography. If we focus on two types of successes rather than the two types of errors, we'll have a method to determine a score of semantic proximity. In fact, two things must be measured: the number of astrological words that generates hits and the number of biographical words that receive hit. Then we will convert those two numbers of successes into percentages by dividing them by their respective total number of words of each list. Why convert in percentage? Because we have to express everything in relative frequencies. Why? Because we don't want numbers to be sensitive to the size of the list. Indeed, we never have the same number of words in any different list. So what is really important is the proportion of the words that match. So for the proximity identity at upper left, what does mean the number 28.8% as we see? It's the average between 19.8 and 37.9%. Why do I take the trouble to make an average between those two percentages? It's to avoid the following kind of problem. For example, I could put thousands of astrological words and I would always manage to connect with the totality of the biographical words. This is also what some astrologers do sometimes without realizing it. But of course, such a strategy would generate several false positives
That's to say that several astrological words would correspond to nothing in the biographical list. But then, the first percentage in that case would be very low, and it would lower the average because we would obviously have a lot of failure in the astrological list. We also have the same problem with the other list. Therefore, this calculation of the average of both sides in relative frequency is to avoid this kind of pitfall. So the 19.8% is the percentage of biographical words that match exactly with the astrological words. For example, the words love, energy, passion, determination, sensuality. The second number, 37.9, is the percentage of astrological words that match exactly with biographical words. Already with this proximity identity of 28.8, one has a good measure of correspondence between the two lists. But this is probably a little too demanding to require having exactly the same words to say that there's a correspondence. For example, in Picasso's biography, we see that he was greedy, and we do not that exact word in his astrological list. We see it right away because the number beside greed is not in the thousands. But what does the number 11 mean next to the word greed? This means that the word greed connects analogically 11 times with astrological words. Indeed, the word greed corresponds to passion here, and other words, ambition, impatience, and so on, 11 times. Even though the word greed is not exactly found among the astrological words, the fact that there are 11 analogies shows that greed is semantically connected with the astrological list. One may wonder how we decide whether there's an analogy or not. It's determined with the help of a thesaurus on which I worked a lot to adapt it to Mastro Expert. Here on the left, we have the list of all the possible 2,885 words of the astrological corpus of Mastro, and on the right, we have their synonyms, or even more widely, their analogues. Automatic queries into that thesaurus determine the kind of analogues that I just showed you. Obviously, the greater the number of analogies between the two lists, the more there's a concordance. We see here on the top left analogy 1, analogy 2, and analogy 3. To count in analogy 1, we consider that we have one hit if we have at least one analogy including an identity. A single analog to have a hit is not very demanding. For example, the word drawing in the biography of Picasso connects with the word painting in the astrological world. Sometimes this one analogy link is tenuous, like mystery, which connect with romanticism, a weak connection. So it's quite easy to obtain one analogy, and it's a reason why the score in percentage of analogy 1 is very high, with a value of 87.9, which is the average of 86 and 89. What does a proximity analogy 2 means? That means that to get a hit, we must have at least two analogy, which is a bit more demanding than analogy 1. For example, biographical wealth connect with astrological generosity, and it also connect with excess. If we now ask for three analogies, the semantic proximity link will be even stronger. For example, polemic connects 3 times, and so it will be part of the 65.4 average here. It connects with astrological conflict, it connects with quarrel, and it connects with discussion. We understand that if conflict, quarrel, and discussion are among the astrological descriptors, we have implicitly found with astrology that Picasso was a polemicist. So even if we don't have exactly the same word, we have the meaning. In the case of Picasso, I know that the biography and astrology connection is very good. It's one of the best. How do I know it's so good? Simply by comparison between the astral works of Picasso and the biographies of several other subjects. It is through comparison in practice that we can calibrate this tool.
In the protocol, we had 42 biographical lists and 42 astrological lists. We have to make all possible 42 times 42, 1,764 comparison and evaluate each comparison with a score. In other words, I take a random biographical list of words and a random astrological list of words. I compare them and it gives us a score. I created a program that used the Semantic Proximity Estimator to do this job in one click, and it will give us results like this. Here at the top, we have the 42 names of the selected personalities: Abbé Pierre, Gianni Agnelli, Arletti. They are in alphabetic order, and as I said, they correspond to what I could use in the book.
Each number in this table represents the result of a comparison between a biography horizontally and an astrological chart vertically. So each intersection of a column with a line gives a score that tells us a level of resemblance. For those familiar with statistics, I normalize the scores calculated by the estimator, and this is the reason why you have negative values in the table. All the names you see in pink at the top address the astrological descriptions. For example, if I take the astrological chart of Gérard Depardieu here, thus a vertical line, this column always represents Depardieu astrological description for each line and allows us to make comparison with biographies of every subject on the lines. For example, the astrological description of Depardieu is compared with the biographical Abbé Pierre here, then with Agnelli, then with Arletti, Aaron, and so on. We see that Depardieu gives the best correspondence not with himself, but rather with Bertolt Brecht here. How do we see it? How do we know? The cell is red and color red correspond to the maximum score. My convention for colors was created to make it easy to remember the same color codes as in the traffic lights. Red is maximum, yellow comes second, then I have green in third, and as I wanted 4, I added pale green. In the case of Depardieu, we would have liked to have red on the diagonal here. Why the diagonal? Because on the diagonal we find the correspondence between astrological Depardieu and biographical Depardieu. Unfortunately, in the case of Depardieu, here on the diagonal I have a score of 0.44, which is not among the 4 best scores. Why? For instance, astrology doesn't see clearly that he is alcoholic and gluten. Fortunately for us astrologers, there are cases that work. Let's see a few of them quickly. I see, for example, here on the diagonal that I have red for Bill Clinton. What does it mean? It means that Bill Clinton has its highest score on the diagonal. Its best correspondence is with Bill Clinton himself. What does it mean? That means that if we take the astrological list of Bill Clinton and compare it blindly with the 42 biographical list, we get the highest score with its own biography. The best correspondence is Clinton. For Picasso, also a perfect correspondence. Red on the diagonal. It could be said that this is pure chance, since we accept the hypothesis that astrology is merely a random chaos as the skeptic deniers believe. Then the game I'm currently playing with all the scores has no other meaning than being a pure gambling game like a lottery. From time to time, it's normal to win. That is to come first out of 42, as in the case of Clinton or Picasso. Indeed, we have one chance on 42. And if we play the game 42 times while playing the 42 characters, on average we expect to win once, and why not 2 or 3 times sometimes. I did not only look at the maximum score to play with one chance on 42. I also gave my chance the opportunity to watch second rank score whose cells are yellow. I will show you one. French Prime Minister Balladur. If we look at the column of Balladur, its best correspondence is not with himself, it is rather with the writer François Bagné, the next one. But we see that the second choice, yellow cell, is the correspondence of Balladur with himself. In other words, if we give ourselves 2 chances rather than 1, we get a success. To conclude, wherever there is a color, we are in the first 4.
By the way, the human brain would be unable to make as many comparisons as the estimator because every comparison requires a lot of work. Comparing a list of words with another one involves a lot of decisions, and it can take at least an hour for each of the 1,764 comparisons. It would have been a tremendous, quasi impossible lot of work for a human being, but fortunately it could be done automatically. The difficulty of research in general is that there are many cases that do not work. There's also a lot of erosion. That is, there's a lot of entropy. In other words, there's a lot of loss. Biographies are not perfect. They are written by different people, so often missing traits. Mastro is far from perfect when it produces its list of traits. And even when everything is perfect, even if astrology is valid, maybe it doesn't work all the time. And there's also the problem of the birth times. Even if I try to work with exact birth hours, there's a lot of uncertainty, especially on births where the time is in the form XX00. That is precisely 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, and so on. With such frequent errors, the astrological portraits are certainly often distorted. So all these factors obviously play against the success of the matching test and could explain why one is far from having 42 hits even if astrology works. Of course, for us astrologers, the ideal expectation would have been that color red is all over the diagonal, 42 successes out of 42. But only astrologers without any experience in research could have such a hope. Let's see the results.
For those familiar with probabilities, actually we have 4 binomial distribution, depending on whether we allow 1, 2, 3, or 4 chances to achieve a success. If we require a red cell to get a success, we have only 1 chance out of 42 at random, and this corresponds to the first binomial law. And as we play 42 times with the 42 columns, in reality, if we play with a probability of 1 over 42, we expect an average of 1 success. That's what EXP means, expectancy. In other words, if astrology is as bogus as its denier claim, the expectation is to randomly get on average only 1 Clinton type of result, giving us 1 chance in 42. But we can also say that we won't allow 2 chances. Say a success would be to fall in the first 2, and this gives a binomial law with a probability of 2 over 42. Playing 42 times, we expect an average of 2 success. If we consider the first 3, it gives 3 over 42 with an expectation of 3 success. If we allow the first 4, it gives 4/42 with an expectation of 4 successes. Let's examine the observed result and their p-values. These results will look disappointing only for someone who doesn't know probabilities. Remember, far too much entropy. From the point of view of a skeptical denier, what have we done? We just played the lottery in a pure astrological random chaos. In fact, the odds that the following results occurred by pure chance are extremely low, as I will show. In the case of probability 1/42 with an expectancy of 1 success, we observe 7 successes. OBS means observed. In other words, we add color red 7 times on the diagonal. The probability of obtaining 7 successes or more is a p-value of 5.6 divided by 100,000. In the second case, with 2 chances, we expect 2 successes, but we observe 12. This gives a p-value of about 4 chances out of 10 millions to get 12 successes or more. In the third case, we expect 3 successes and we observe 14. We had about 7 chances out of 10 million to observe 14 successes or more. In the last case, with an expectation of 4, we observed 15 successes. We had about 4 chances over 1 million to get that or more.
What does it all mean? It means that we have 2 choices. We continue to maintain with the skeptical deniers that astrology is a pure random chaos, and then, if this protocol is correct, we are obliged to acknowledge that we were extremely lucky to get such results, since we had so few chances to win at this kind of lottery. Or we say, no, this protocol shows that this is not a pure random chaos. In my opinion, this shows objectively that there's a strong link between the birth charts and the related biographies. Anything else in astrology could explain such results? I hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and above all, I hope that it can be useful and inspiring you for your own research. I'm presently working on a full replication of this study. Thank you.